Looking for the perfect hidden gem for your next night out? Welcome to Almost on the Lake, where the food is delicious. The service is top-notch. And the atmosphere feels like home. Family-owned and locally loved. Come see why everyone is talking about Almost on the Lake.
Nestled in the heart of historic downtown Wilkesboro, the 1915 offers a wedding experience like no other. Once a federal courthouse and post office, the 1915 combines rich history with timeless charm. From intimate gatherings to full-day rentals, we provide the perfect backdrop for your most cherished moments. With indoor and outdoor options, bridal and groom suites, every detail is crafted just for you. Make your wedding unforgettable at the 1915, Wilkesboro's historic wedding venue, where your story begins.
Closed captions for this episode of Life in Wilkes is brought to you by Deal Insurance Agency in Wilkesboro, an award-winning, experienced, family-owned and operated agency with service and coverage that goes above and beyond expectations. Join us on a captivating journey as we explore the charm, history, and vibrant culture of Wilkes County. Discover the hidden gems, inspiring stories, and remarkable people that make Wilkes a place worth knowing and celebrating. Join us now and experience the unique essence of Life in Wilkes.
Oh, David, so good to see you again, friend.
And good morning.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, and
it is afternoon. That's right.
Yeah. What was that thing? Good morning, good afternoon, and good night.
Who did that?
I was hoping you knew.
Oh, well, that's out of my background, but I'm trying to remember. I can't remember. Somebody's going to remember, and they're going to write you.
Yeah, they write. People write letters now. Occasionally. That's right.
Passenger pigeon, whatever they're using.
They do that.
They'll text you. That's what they'll do.
They'll text me.
They'll text you.
And they'll text you and say, well, this is who it is. This is where that came from. Midway, it's going to come to both of us. Okay, so today our visit is all about musicians, historic musicians, I refer to them as, in Wilkes County.
Yes.
And this is pulled from a big project that you're working on, a book project, which is long in the making, it would be.
Still in the works.
Yeah. So I thought when we first started talking about that, and knowing that you just moved and you've got the house you're working on, I was like, we can't wait till the book comes out to start doing some of these segments because they're so rich. The good news is that everybody now will have, by the time the book is out, will have heard several of these stories, and then they'll definitely want to buy the book. That's the whole idea.
I'd love for them to have it.
Yeah, there you go.
We've got our big filing cabinet directly to our right. Tim, your tech Tim over there, he's seen it. It's got all the material in it, that and a bunch of drives. But most of the material in that book, a lot of it's up here and in here, and in the families of the people that we're talking about.
So now you're pulling all that together.
That's the trick, because it's over a period of the book itself covers a period from the mid-1920s up until the times of Merlefest and the late 80s and a little bit beyond. But that segment in there is the thing, and it mostly centers around a 9-county area, which is in truth a musical, fertile ground, a hotbed of regional players. There was something, every area in every state of this great place has their groupings of musicians, and you find places like Chicago that had all the great R&B bands, and New York, of course, because of all the record labels involved there. L.A. brought us people like the Eagles and all that, Linda Ronstadt. But in regional acoustic music, mostly acoustic and some not so acoustic, even into the rock and roll days, There's a 9-county area in western North Carolina that's super saturated and always has been with some kind of musical presence, and it bred groups of musicians, families of musicians, beyond the norm. And I only realized this when I got into recording work and would be talking to people from other states and other areas, and I'd tell them, all these people that lived here. And part of the reason they came to North Carolina to record was they didn't have access to all the players they'd like to have. And I said, boy, we've got them here, and always have had. But most of the subjects in the book are about musicians that were born, raised here, learned their craft here, and as young people went on to ply their trade as a musician. And most of the time, somewhere along the line, right before or by middle age, they come back home, they marry, they raise a family, and they live out their life here or somewhere in the locality. Still playing on the weekend and entertaining people and recording, but they lived it out as day workers.
Have you been doing this on your research long enough now to where you have a reasonable handle on what it is, what it was in this region that cultivated so many talented people?
That's and I wax poetic here. That's the mystique of it. There was something here. Maybe it's God made. I'm assuming that it is because music comes from Him. There was a musical presence here before the white man was ever here, before English settlers came here. The Cherokee knew about it, and the banks of the river, Yadkin River, the North Wilkesboro and the Wilkesboro areas, before they were towns, the Cherokees would have their harvest celebration right there between where the towns are and the localities. There would be hundreds of them. And a few people from other tribes would join in on this, I found out later. But they would have harvest festival, and sometimes this thing would last for a week or better. And they would be celebrating the harvest. They would be gathering in crops together. They would dance. They would play their music of their people. And this took place not far from where Merlefest takes place.
Right.
But it was taking place here before even the settlers came here. There's history of this.
Some years ago, I was very fortunate to spend a lot of time with the Cherokee in the Western Band of Cherokee Indians, and enjoyed or experienced ceremonies that most people outside the tribe do not have the opportunity to experience. But the one thing that was open was the music. I don't know about you, but for me, as I would hear hours of this music, there was something rhythmic and soulful about it. I'm not Cherokee, but there was something that was touching about it. Did you have that experience?
It is, and it's present in all types of music. Part of it comes from things we've been exposed to in our background, and it may be something as mundane as a movie score that we've heard ethnic music in as a child, and it brings back that memory. But all music is if it's real music, is some human form of expression.
Right.
You're just doing it with your hands and with an instrument, but it comes from inside. And like I say, the Cherokees celebrated their harvest festival with this. It became, after those times, as the settlers came in, they brought their European instruments with them, and most of the time this was whatever could be carried easily. Right. Very few things like a guitar, the Spanish guitar, that it was a long time ever getting here. But fiddles, as fragile as they are, they either brought some or they hewed some out of some wood and got some horsehair and made an old bow. And it was a throwback to the violins of Western Europe, but they played the old Celtic tunes that they had learned over there. And then the banjos came here, most of all from an African culture, but the slaves of the time played them for their own entertainment, and all the plantation owners and stuff, they liked that sound, and so they would get these folks to play for them. So the musicians were exposed to each other, and fiddles and banjos and what became instruments that we knew of as old-time and bluegrass instruments here. That's what it evolved into, the Italian mandolin and then eventually the guitar. Those things were being used, and by the 1800s, mid to late 1800s, this area, there were a lot of people learning to play, and families were starting, kids were learning from their folks. And this area became this fertile ground, and I call it bottomland for lack of a better word. You know, you always wanted to plant something in bottomland because that's where all the nutrients ran down off the mountainsides and gathered in the flats, and the ground was fertile. Plant your seeds in there. Well, that's where the musical seeds were being planted. And those areas from, and I use Wilkes because this is where I live, but that area were those counties that border Wilkes. And the musicians that came out of these counties, Allegheny up in Sparta, for instance, Del Reeves came out of Sparta, big country performer. Jim Shoemate, the first fiddler for Flatt and Scruggs, came from right up here in the McGrady area up there. The banjo player in the 50s for Bill Monroe, Gar Bowers, came from that same area up there.
Wilkes County.
You had Johnny Taylor on. Johnny comes from that same neck of the woods and played with Bill Monroe's brother, Charlie. So each one of these places had its contributions, but they go back to that musical presence that was here. There was something here that made them want to do that. I can't describe it other than that, other than I know it's here.
Maybe it's because it's in our, what you've just described. Those are our roots, those people. I mean, when we think about the Scottish heritage, you know, I mean, just not far from here, you know, that we've got the Highland Games, the Scottish Highland Games. Well, their entire area was settled with Scots, right?
And the tunes that they played on those old fiddles and stuff, I mean, I defy anybody that's got any humanity in them to hear any old Scotch-Irish jig that had its roots in Europe. I defy them to sit there and listen to this for long without patting their foot.
Oh,
and you said that stuff, those Indian tunes worked on you. Oh, sure. Same thing. Yeah. Same thing.
Yeah, and the fiddle does too, and the violin, and it's just touching somehow.
The violin, it becomes a human voice. It's so similar. The rhythmic things of the banjo and the guitars and stuff become part of your heart rhythms, your bodily rhythms. And I think it's just related to our makeup some way. I'm not a scientist and I don't know, but I know that music affects people.
In your moments of sadness, because everybody has those, and you pick up an instrument and you play it, are there certain instruments that settle you?
Yes, and certain instruments will bring a tear to my eye. I think about when I'm as a recording musician, we're called on to, they give us a lot of leeway in some of these songs, the producers do, and they say, play me something in this verse that's going to describe this lyric of for instance, sadness. If we're playing something behind, if it's a gospel song and it's a slow ballad and maybe we're playing a tune describing the crucifixion or some such scene, whatever that vignette is, we might use a violin, long, slow, vibrato type notes. If it's something that's going to be to get you in a lively frame of mind, they say, put a banjo on the last chorus. Let's really lift that last chorus, and make this thing be what it is. The choice of instrument makes a lot of. And I'll tell you, we are conditioned as Americans in particular, what we have grown up with, particularly since the age of television, radio for sure, but then also television. All the shows that we grew up watching were accompanied by background music, just like films were.
Right.
And those sounds dictated our emotions. even you take a Western, and maybe a guy's doing horse riding out on the plains and stuff.
Right.
The old gut string guitar, just a few notes on that
Right.
will make that scene come to life.
That's right. That's right. So we were influenced from childhood with these sensory experiences.
Yeah.
And that's what and it's no different today.
And it isn't. It's the same thing. And I love getting to be part of those productions where a well-placed 2 or 3 notes. I had to do a session, let's see, it was the day before yesterday. It was yesterday in Asheville, and we were doing, I was working for a gospel group called the Rogers Family, and there was a verse in a song where this woman is remembering her childhood. And she's just talking about really plain things about growing up as a young child. And they said to put something on the verse. And that was all the direction they gave me. And I picked up a harmonica, and I just played a few single notes between her lines that would have reminded me of a soundtrack of any kids show that I had ever seen on television. I just made 2 or 3 lines up, and it worked for them, and they liked that. Mm-hmm. But I love getting to do that.
Yes,
I love it.
You're part of the magic making, right?
Well, sometimes you make about 8 or 10 takes at something and it ain't working, and they say, "Why don't you try something else, Dave?" Yeah. But I like being part of it.
But being part of that process to help bring. It's more than bringing it to life, it's bringing our emotions to life, right? And that's really what it's all about. Well, that's great. Well, let's talk about a couple of the musicians that are from this area. And not only from this area, but they did a few things that impacted music that has gone all over the world.
They certainly did.
Why don't we start with Ralph Pennington? I think we have a mutual friend, Vivian Hopkins, and that was her father.
That was Vivian, the whole family of them. I met all of them after I met Ralph when I was a young guy. And Ralph was a utility player. This is what they're called in the industry. Ordinarily, you'll have a musician, and they might play 1 or 2 instruments or 3, but they excel at one thing. And that's wonderful. We all think about Liberace as being a piano player.
Right.
Floyd Kramer's a piano player. We think of the people that are great violinists or great. Earl Scruggs was a banjo player. We forget sometimes that Earl Scruggs also played every other instrument in that band, but he was known as a banjo player.
Right.
But utility players are the guys that are called on to be pack mules either in a band or in a recording session. And if they play several instruments and they play them well enough, they're just known to bring their instruments. That's what I've tried to work at during my life. One of my first influences was Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith was known as a guitar player, but Arthur also was known as a fiddle player, a mandolin player. He played several things. And so Ralph was this way. Ralph Pennington was... when he was first growing up, Ralph was born in 1923, I believe, and Ralph was born into that hotbed up there around Glendale Springs, and knew all these people like Gar Bowers, the banjo player we talked about, Jim Shoemake, the fiddle player that was with the Flat and them when they first formed the Foggy Mountain Boys, and he was born into that, and he wanted to play, and he didn't have anything to play. And one of his family members, he wanted to plunk around if he had a banjo. He said, "I just really love to do this." And when he was about 5 or 6, one of the family members, if I understand right, took an old box or an axle grease box or something and hammered together a rudimentary little banjo for him to play. And that's what he started playing on. But he wanted to mess with the fiddle, and when he got his hands on one finally as a young man, he started playing that fiddle, and then he was playing the banjo, the fiddle. He worked on mandolin. There was a mandolin or 2 in the area he could find. And by the time he was around 15, he was playing publicly with some people, making a few dollars doing it, and this just whetted his appetite for that stuff. And he became proficient at several instruments. All of the instruments that are considered to be in a bluegrass band, with the possible exception of dobro. I never saw him playing a dobro. But he played banjo, he played mandolin, he played acoustic guitar, bass fiddle, good bass fiddle player, and fiddle, good fiddle player, and he sang.
Are you saying he learned all of that by 15?
He was learning all of this by
okay.
15. He was good enough to play publicly and play with other people.
And he picked it up quickly.
He picked it up quickly, and this came along. Well, by the time radio was really starting to pick up in this area, WKBC, WILX, those were the two stations in town, and there were stations outside Hickory, WHKY, places like that. Ralph started playing with some of the people that were playing on the radio, and this was in the late 30s.
In the studio.
In the radio live radio settings. In other words, the radio. When it first got going, there was not a lot of records being played on radio. The technology was not good enough that it didn't sound real good.
Right.
They had some years before they were able to start playing records, but they had live music, and there was, like at WKBC here on Saturday morning, starting about 7 or 7:30. There would be live bands. My father was in one of them, the Rocky Road Boys, Hubert Engelbert. The Church Brothers had radio broadcast here. They worked at the radio station in Mount Airy, WPAQ, big station for music. And Ralph was in these bands, in and out of these bands. But that was just getting started. Well, here comes World War II. And Ralph went to the Navy, I think, in 44. Vivian can tell us for sure, but I believe it was 44, and was there in 1944 and 45. Then he comes out of the Navy, and he still wants to play, but he's also wanting to get on with life. And playing then was at best a part-time job unless you were in a road group, and there were very few road groups during the end of the war there to get a shot at being with. You had to leave here to go do it. So he got into furniture work. Well, the thing about furniture work is you're working with wood.
Oh, right.
And tables and chair legs and finishes and everything from knives to saws. And those saws would figure plenty in his life. But anyway, he started playing. And back at that time, these are post-Depression years, most of the people around here that had an instrument, it might have been a homemade instrument. If they had a store-bought instrument, that was a wonderful thing. Well, if it got tore up, there weren't many people to work on them things. Right. There weren't luthiers just scattered around here working on guitars. If it had a crack in it, you learned how to fix it. You couldn't just go out and buy another one. And Ralph started working on instruments, and he wanted a lot of instruments, and the more you got, the more you have to service them. And he learned how to fix them when they busted. Naturally, that leads to being able to make one. I don't know exactly where he started making them, but it was sometime in the 40s after he got back from the war, because he had access to the wood because he was working in the furniture industry, and he had access to the saws. Most people are going to eat lunch when they have a lunch break. Ralph would work on a piece of wood during his lunch break and cut it and get it ready to put into an instrument. And he was doing this in, I want to say it was Hickory, in 1947. He was making a bass fiddle bridge on a bandsaw. And some way it got away from him, and it sent both hands flying into the blade of that saw. I'd have to remember, he lost almost all of 2 or 3 fingers.
Oh,
it got both hands.
I've seen those pictures.
You've seen them, all right? And he only has like one joint on some of them, and that's his noting hand. Vivian told me, because this was before I was born, Vivian told me that when he was still bandaged from these wounds, he almost bled to death, and co-workers helped him get it staunched. But once they got him sewed up And while he was still bandaged, he was trying to figure out some positions that he could play on a bass fiddle. It had done away with his dexterity on smaller instruments like mandolin and banjo, but he was figuring out how to cup that hand around and note the bass notes while he still had bandages on his hand. I don't know the exact time element, but he made a fine bass player.
Wow.
And there are pictures of him playing bass after the accident that are available that you can see. And he wasn't satisfied with that. He was writing songs. He started writing.
That's when he started writing after
I think
the
that's
accident.
when it really got to be a thing.
Right.
Because he had to have something to
It
concentrate
needed to be a
on.
thing,
Yeah,
right.
it was
Right.
maybe cathartic, whatever it was.
Sure.
He started writing songs, and he became a prolific songwriter. Stacks of them. And some of them have never been heard. But he was involved playing bass with the Church Brothers up from the Mount Pleasant area, Ward Eller and all those guys,
Right.
because they had a radio hookup. They had a recording contract with what became the Wilkes County based label, Blue Ridge Records. And they had started recording for Richer Tone Records out around Knoxville, but that got bought out, and their masters got bought out, and they came back to Wilkes. They recorded here at the radio station, WKBC, and they recorded at WPAQ in Mount Airy. And the reason they were doing that, you couldn't go to a recording studio then. There were none.
Right. So they were doing their masters at the radio
Direct to disc,
station.
direct to disc, the masters at the radio station, because most radio stations had a disc cutting machine. And they were recording there. Well, they needed original songs. Now, the daughter of Mr. Adams that ran the label, Drusilla wrote a lot, and Drusilla wrote with Sears Church, who was one of the Church Brothers, and they wrote a lot. But Ralph contributed heavily to these songs. And I didn't know for years. I had heard those records. And some of those records I took to be, for instance, the song Angel with Blue Eyes, I took to be a song about a lover and the girl's gone and he's lamenting her being gone, the subject in the song. Come to find out, Ralph had written that song, and it was about the death of his child not long after she was born. Angel with Blue Eyes. And the words all of a sudden start making sense. Yeah. Now, as is the case, a lot of times the band leaders would copyright songs in their name or the label head, and as in that case, it was Drusilla Adams. And my understanding is that most of the copyrights went to them. Ralph was known to be a very giving, sharing kind of guy. He just wanted to play music. He wanted to write music, and he wanted to see it recorded. So they're playing up at WKBC, and I'm going to hit this, and it is whatever the listener wants to do with it. The band, the Church Brothers, were playing at KBC. Ralph was playing, if I understand right, playing bass with them. And he falls in love with Ruby. Ruby, he marries.
Right.
Ruby's working at Cress's 5 and 10. My mother's working there at the time. I didn't know the fact that they worked together. But anyway, again, this was before I'm born. And Ralph runs into Ruby fixing up a window display down there, and it must have been love at first sight, right, whatever it was. And so Ruby, as near as I can tell, has blonde hair. I think she's blue-eyed. Check with Vivian. I'm sure this is correct. And she lives in a cabin at that time, which is at the base of a mountain, right up next to a pine grove. And that cabin is still there.
Right.
Those pines still grow there, the latter-day pines. So Ralph, in writing songs, I think he wrote a song about Ruby. Now, Flatt and Scruggs were a brand new act. They had just left Bill Monroe in 1948 and started out on their own. one of the first places they played, you had to have a radio station as a base of operation so you could advertise your shows. They were on WHKY in Hickory for a while. There's pictures of them over there with the big HKY.
Was that the beginning?
Microphone.
Was that the beginning?
That was right at the first. And you find that first picture of Jim Shoemate from up here in Wilkes.
Right.
You find him playing fiddle with them in that picture at WHKY. They didn't stay there long. They went on to bigger and better things, but that's where they were. They were hunting material because they had just been signed to Mercury Records, and Mercury Records was going to do a session on them out in the Knoxville area, and they had to have a lot of material quick. Well, they were writing songs as fast as they could write songs, and some of these were, they had a few old standards that they did, but they were trying for new material. And Flat wrote a lot, and Earl wrote a lot. And they had instrumentals that they wrote. But they got a hold of a song. Lester and Earl copyrighted it. It's called Cabin in Caroline. Well, now, it's an interesting thing about that song. The verse of that song says, "There's a cabin in the pines in the hills of Caroline, and a blue-eyed girl is waiting there for me. Going back someday, and from her I'll never stray, in the cabin in the hills of Caroline." And he talks about the length of the trip in the next verse and all this stuff. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl. Lester's wife was Gladys. There was nothing blonde-haired or blue-eyed about Gladys. I mean, I don't have any color pictures, but if she wasn't a brunette, the cameras weren't working.
Right.
And they were successfully married for a long time. It just didn't strike me that that would be something that Lester would write back in those days. So I didn't think anything else about it when I was first hearing the song. It's the first song I ever learned to sing in a band. Loved it. So years later, Ralph Stanley, of all people, Ralph Stanley of the Stanley Brothers, of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou soundtrack, that Ralph Stanley. Vivian knew Ralph. The reason she knew Ralph was because her daddy, Ralph Pennington, used to fill in with the Stanley Brothers on a regular basis if they needed a bass player. And back in those days, most singers and players, they didn't carry the same players for any length of time. It was whatever they could afford at the time. The Stanley boys would go out sometimes just the two of them, or they might take a fiddler. Once in blue moon, they'd get a bass player. And Ralph Pennington, being able to play bass, Ralph would go. He knew them. They were from McClure, Virginia, and he knew them, so he'd go play for them. Ralph Stanley told Vivian one time, he said, "Your daddy wrote that song." And the tale is, and it's the legend, and I kind of believe it, that Ralph was friends with Earl. He was and they used to come to Hickory to rehearse for that session that was going to come down in Knoxville. And Ralph said, "I got one you can have if you need material." And I tend to think that might have been the song. I think it probably was. But anyway, he kept on playing as a utility player. He worked with a lot of people, worked a lot with banjo picker of great notoriety, L.W. Lambert out of the Statesville area, and Harold Tomlin, these players down there in the mid-1950s. And like I say, they recorded all this Church Brothers stuff. And the Church Brothers songs were pressed into 78 RPM records, which were prevalent in the day. And this went on for a while. He actually worked in a band with L.W. Lambert, Curly Kilby, Steve Kilby's dad, and Harold Tomlin. They recorded some, and all this stuff wound up on the Blue Ridge label. Well, the Blue Ridge label ceased to exist after 1958. And those masters eventually got bought they were re-released in 1968, but Rounder Records, that has done so much to preserve good bluegrass and bring new bluegrass to the listeners, Rounder Records purchased those masters and re-released that stuff and wrote a book. They had a book written about the Church Brothers thing. And Ralph's presence is all around this stuff.
Throughout that.
You even see him listed on a couple of the, I think there was a 45 or two maybe pressed. But you see his name on the labels. They listed the players' names on the labels sometimes, and Ralph's name would be listed on the record label too. I got to meet him in the mid-'60s. I had just been playing with my dad's square dance band. I was playing banjo. I wanted to meet every musician I could find. And I would go play wherever Daddy would take me to let me play with whoever. And I was still playing with him. And I was playing I think it was a wagon train or something. They had a square dance. And we were up on a flatbed truck, and I was playing, I had took my steel guitar. This was in the late 60s. I took my steel guitar and took my banjo to play with Wayne Johnson, a big musical notoriety here. He had a band going down there, and they needed somebody to come play, and I went and played with him. And he said, Ralph Pennington's going to be here in a little bit. And I said, all right, I'd love to meet him. And he came, and he played everything he could get his hands on that night. And them little old nub fingers, he was all over that fiddle with that thing and had a good bow arm. He played some mandolin, and then he got a hold of my banjo. And I watched this man with not much hand left over here on this side playing with one finger and one thumb, and it sounded like Scruggs to me. I mean, it was just amazing. And so I got to meet him, and I got to know him.
Well, wait. You met him, so tell us about that. So what?
Well, he didn't know me other than he knew my dad.
Right.
And he asked me about who I had played with and all this stuff. And I got to talking to him about how he lost his fingers.
Yeah.
And
what did he say?
Oh, he just said, well, I was working on a bass fiddle bridge. He didn't make a big deal about it. It was just like, yeah, I had a car wreck the other day. Now, let me tell you something else. And I just couldn't believe this guy could play with that kind of handicap. It was no handicap to him. He found ways of working around. He could curl that hand up on that fiddle neck. And I kept thinking, I've got a whole set of fingers, and I can't do what I just saw this guy do. I was about 13, 14 years old. And it encouraged me because I thought, gosh, man, I got something to work with, you know. And I didn't see him as much as I would have liked to, because it was not long after that he went and moved the family, and they went, so about 1970. I would see him occasionally on a gig somewhere, and he might be walking around, we'd just talk. But I got to hearing records that he'd played on. And he moved his family about 1970 to Gold Hill, down in Rowan County. And he spent another 20 years plus down there. And he was working in the wood industry down there some way. And he had access to all this wood. And I found out later he was always making instruments, and instruments that I had taken for granted. Ronnie Black had a mandolin he'd been playing for a long time. And I finally asked him, I said, that played in our band, I said, where'd you get that mandolin? Oh, he said, Ralph Pennington made that. He said, it belongs to Paul Stokes. He said, I borrowed it from Paul. Him and Ralph were friends, and he made it for Paul. And I went down to Paul's house, and I said, you got anything else he made? Yeah, I got a guitar he made. And he come out with a flat-top guitar. It sounded
And
wonderful.
this was all after he had the accident.
This was after the fingers.
All after that.
And he made guitars. He made, I guess, one of the most famous instruments that he made, and I still haven't gotten the chronology of it exactly right. Wonderful bluegrass band that's been around forever, Third Time Out. A good friend of mine, Wayne Benson, he's a big friend of Eric Ellis, my cousin, and Eric's kind of my connection with Wayne. Wayne, I think he's living in South Carolina now. His wife is a killing good banjo player with the Grascals, Kristen Benson, and we get to do recording sessions together some. Wayne, I think it was the first mandolin he played, I think Ralph made. And the kind of the history of that mandolin, when Ralph was leaving up here, or about the time he left up here, there was a door on something, on a building, in a house. I don't know where it was at. It was a hardwood door. It's made, I think, out of maple. And he was always collecting pieces of wood. And there's something about that door. He'd tap on it. He'd mess with it. He wanted that door.
The sound.
And he got that door and took it with him, and he cut wood out of that door, and that's what that mandolin's back and sides were made out of. He machined it out of that door wood. I lost track of the mandolin, and I've talked to Wayne about it several times, but it went from Wayne, who was a young boy learning to play, it went from him, I think, to another young boy. So you see the thread of what Ralph did post handicap, if you can even call it a handicap, with two other young players getting to play a quality instrument. And I'd love to know where that thing went. It probably exists somewhere.
David, you've been doing this for a long time. You've seen lots of instruments. Mm-hmm. To your knowledge, have you played or know of any other instrument that has been made by someone that's digitally challenged, I guess?
I would have to sit and think about that. I don't know anybody that had the problem to the depth that Ralph had it.
Right.
That would have stopped most people from being anything other than a person, well, he's not working anymore, he hurt his hands. Mm-hmm. It was like, okay, this happened, that's too bad, now I'm going to get on with life. Mm-hmm. Man, I'd love to have that kind of resolve. I have seen one-armed fiddle players with a hook, and as a matter of fact, I think, what was that boy's name? I used to play with him at Charlotte. I've seen him blind. Doc Watson, blindness was no handicap for him.
Right.
Man, get on top of his house and adjust his own antenna, not so he could see the picture better, but so the sound quality
was there.
And Ralph was that way. I don't know of anybody right offhand that I think had to survive something like that. I did work with a young boy that used to play with Doyle Lawson, who worked with, and I want to say he was born with this. He had one piece of a finger and one thumb on his left hand, and he managed to play acoustic guitar with this. He played banjo with Doyle Lawson, killing good banjo player. I did a session with him, and that kind of reminds me of Ralph. But Ralph it was both hands for him.
You're a musician. I mean, is there something that just draws you so much to the feeling that you get when you play? You're bringing people joy. You bring yourself joy when you're doing it.
Yeah, that's the first thing you do with it.
That would push you so dramatically that you would go beyond the obstacles. Because that's special, isn't it?
It is. I've never been in the shape Ralph was. I had to work through I cut myself with a machete when I was 13 years old, and the doctor said they had to sew it all up, my fingers were all bound up. I had to play the wagon train the next week with my dad, and that was, we was making big money. I must have been making $10 a night. And so this was in the 60s. It was big money for me. Right. But I remember trying to play with two fingers. I wanted to get that through. Went through the wreck in 2015, broke this arm. I couldn't play for 9 weeks, and I went and played a couple of gigs doing one-handed piano and playing a harp just so I could play a gig. But I never had to go through anything like what Ralph did. But you want to do it. You want to do it. I mean, you have to do it. There's something that compels you to do it.
So Ralph Pennington is definitely a legend from Wilkes County in many different ways.
Big time, and he's well preserved in the memories of him, partly because of that family of his. Right. And Vivian has done wonders. to preserve his legacy. And then she's coming out with a recording project that involves his songs that I've been blessed to get to be a part of. And Wayne Benson, as a matter of fact, young guy with the mandolin playing, and Kristen, they're all on this record. Plus people from all over across the United States. Herb Peterson's on this thing, and he's from California. Mark Fain from Nashville, Tennessee. So we've had a good time doing this record.
Let's do Cabin in Carolina.
That's a good one. That's one of the old flat numbers. Lay it in there.
And a blue-eyed girl is waiting there for me. I'll be going back someday, and from her I'll never stray. In the cabin in the hills of Carolina.
Anything about that surprise you? Because you mentioned some people that are well known and incredibly talented. And when Vivian calls and says, "Hey, this is from a dad," and everybody said yes.
When we first started it, she came to my house, and she was actually, I was interviewing her about her dad for the book to get some stuff that I didn't know, and she brought me wonderful pictures. But we started talking about it. She said, "I'd really love to record some of his songs," and just good bluegrass band. And we started talking about it like a little regional thing. Yeah, well, we could do part of it here at the house. Might go. I said, "Let's go up to Asheville. I got a buddy up there that records. Got a good studio. We could do it there if you want to spend a couple of days. Depends on, if you want to involve players, if you just want me and you to do it or whatever." And then it started blossoming. And she said, "Well, I think I'd like to have so-and-so on the record. I'll call them." Next time she called me, she had about 6 or 7 musicians lined up, and then we weren't done yet. And I said, "Okay." So we did several days of tracking, depending on when the players could come in. And it was just fun. And she knew Herb Peterson, and Peterson was a national artist, and she knew Mark Fain, and so there weren't any introductions there or any begging. When she called him Cabin in Caroline, Herb couldn't wait to get his fingers on that, because, again, that song's special. It's the first song that Flatt and Scruggs ever recorded as a band. That was the first one. The guy that played the intro was Jim Shoemate, right here in Wilkes County. He played the intro to the song. The first notes you hear of Flatt and Scruggs and the Foggy Mountain Boys are Cabin in Caroline with the Wilkes County fiddle player. So Ralph, his stuff bears preserving.
And Vivian is helping make sure that happens.
Oh yeah,
and you're part of that, and her band of friends, which maybe that process, this very recording, embodies the spirit of bluegrass music and the people involved.
There were a few of us that got together for this that probably hadn't seen each other in a long, long time, and we got together and actually did some picking together, during the session. And we did it up at Van Atkins' studio, the Shop Studio, and Van's a world-class engineer and just a great place to cut any kind of music, but bluegrass in particular. We're right up on top of a mountain up above Asheville, which was its own hotbed of music for many years with Bascom, Lamar, Lunsford, and all these people.
That sounds like a lot of special moments with a lot of special people, and
we sure had big
that's
time.
what it's all about. Well, David, this has been a great visit together.
Enjoyed it.
Our next visit, we will get to Doc Walsh.
Sorry,
and it'll all be about Doc. I think this merely brings to life the depth of all the people that you're spending time with and that you're writing on. We could have cut this short, but I think all of these moments when you have so many real moments to share as well, I think it's worth us taking time to share those moments.
I just hope there's two factions of people. I hope that get to hear this stuff, that get to read the book, if the Lord lets me finish the book, and that's what we're shooting for. One are the descendants of the families of those players, of which there are so many that are still here, and world collectors of the music, and we'll talk about that a little later. But then the other people are the young folks that are coming along playing. I want them to know who these people were. I want them to know why that music has been preserved for them in this bottom land, in this fertile area. You're living in a great place here. Carry on your piece of the story, your piece of the torch. I want to hand it to libraries and educational facilities and schools, just so folks will remember who they were.
History is profoundly important.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yes. David, thanks a lot. We'll talk soon.
Okay, take care.
Thank you for spending time with us on Life in Wilkes. We value you as a viewer and appreciate when you share this show with your friends and family. Be sure to bookmark our channel and join us again on the next episode of Life in Wilkes.
Girl,